They told you that silence is weakness, that if you don't constantly explain yourself, defend yourself, and speak louder than everyone else, you'll be forgotten. They lied. Because the truth is this: silence is not weakness. It is one of the most terrifying weapons of psychological warfare ever discovered. You have been programmed, since birth, to fill every gap with words, to chase validation through explanations, to fear pauses in conversations because you were conditioned to believe that silence means you're losing, that silence means you're powerless, that silence means you don't belong. But here's what will shock you. Silence is the exact opposite. Strategic silence is control. It is command. It is a form of dominance so ruthless, so unnerving that entire kingdoms have fallen under its weight. Machiavelli himself understood this principle centuries ago. He knew that silence was the deadliest tool of rulers, the invisible blade that carves fear into the minds of enemies without a single word being spoken. The matrix you live in doesn't want you to discover this, because if you learn to master silence, if you learn to weaponize it, you become untouchable. You stop playing by their rules of endless chatter, meaningless debates, and desperate attempts to win approval. You move into a higher realm of influence where your words are rare, your presence is heavy, and your absence is louder than other men's noise. Here's the brutal truth. Most men never understand this. They are slaves to noise. They cannot endure the discomfort of silence, so they fill it with weakness. They expose themselves. They show their insecurity. And the stronger man, the man who knows the terrifying power of silence, destroys them without lifting a finger. In this video, you are going to learn 8 Machiavellian principles of strategic silence that will transform you into a fortress of psychological dominance. Once you master these principles, you will never be ignored, dismissed, or disrespected again. Instead, you will command fear, respect, and authority in every interaction. Warning: once you see these truths, you can never go back. You will begin to see silence differently, not as emptiness, but as power. And once you realize this, every conversation, every relationship, every negotiation will be changed forever. This is not another watered-down communication skills lecture. This is war. This is Machiavelli's deadliest tool, adapted for the modern battlefield of life, business, and relationships. If you are ready to break free from the matrix of noise and become the man whose silence speaks louder than the screams of others, stay until the very end. Because one principle, one shift, could flip your entire life strategy upside down. Write this declaration in the comments right now. I refuse to be psychologically dominated. Here's what's going to shock you. Weak men cannot stand silence. The very moment a room goes quiet, they panic. Their heart races. Their mind scrambles for something, anything to say, because silence exposes them. It strips away the illusions they hide behind. And that's why silence is terrifying. It reveals who truly has control. The brutal truth is this: you were programmed to believe that constant talking equals confidence. Teachers told you to speak up. Society praises the loudest voice, and weak leaders try to dominate by filling space with endless words. But in reality, men who cannot control their tongues are slaves to their emotions. They cannot endure the weight of stillness because it magnifies their insecurity. Psychologically, silence is pressure. When you stop speaking, the other person's brain rushes to fill the void. They overthink. They reveal too much. They expose their weaknesses. It's not the silence itself that's deadly. It's what silence does inside the enemy's mind. It forces them to wrestle with themselves, and that battle destroys the unprepared. Machiavelli once said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." This means the man who knows the power of restraint, the man who acts with strategy instead of desperation, always wins. Silence is that restraint. It is choosing not to reveal, not to beg, not to defend, and in doing so, you force the fool to defeat himself. Think about the last time you were in an argument. The weak man argues back immediately, defending every attack, raising his voice, trying to win through noise. The strong man, however, lets the silence hang in the air. He watches his enemy unravel, desperate to get a reaction. By saying nothing, he says everything. The silence cuts deeper than words ever could. Here's where most men fail. They think silence makes them look passive. But silence, when used strategically, is active warfare. It communicates. I don't need to explain myself. I don't need to prove anything. I control this moment. That is dominance. Implementation is simple. In your next interaction, do not rush to fill the silence. Hold it. Let the other person drown in their own words. Watch how quickly they reveal their hand, confess their insecurity, or retreat under the pressure. This is how weak men destroy themselves, while strong men command authority without speaking. Leave this statement in the comments. My silence is power. Let me break this down for you. Silence is not absence. It is a weapon. The average man sees silence as nothingness, a blank space to be avoided. But the ruthless man, the Machiavellian man, understands that silence is pressure, silence is dominance, silence is control. It is not passive, it is a blade, sharpened and deadly, hidden in plain sight. Here's the brutal truth. Most men reveal themselves through their need to be heard. They believe words equal strength, but words often expose weakness. The more you speak, the more you leak. Your fears, your doubts, your insecurities. Silence, however, is airtight. It protects you. It keeps your enemies in the dark, forcing them to guess, to assume, to spiral into paranoia. And paranoia destroys. Psychologically, strategic silence activates the enemy's insecurity. The human brain hates uncertainty. When you remain silent, you become a mirror where the other person projects their own fears. They start to wonder, did I say something wrong? Does he know more than I think? Is he judging me? That uncertainty eats away at their confidence like acid. Silence forces them into submission without you lifting a finger. Machiavelli once said, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." This means that a wise ruler does not reveal everything himself. He observes, listens, and allows others to betray themselves. Strategic silence makes men expose their true nature without you even asking. The silence itself interrogates them more effectively than words ever could. Imagine this. In a negotiation, a weak man rushes to accept the first offer, speaking nervously to avoid awkward silence. But the strong man stays still, silent, expressionless. The other side begins to sweat. They second-guess their own offer. They sweeten the deal, add more value, just to break the unbearable quiet. The silence itself shifted the power dynamic. This is where most men fail. They cannot endure the discomfort. They break first. They speak to ease the tension, not realizing that the one who speaks first always surrenders ground. But the man who masters silence knows this law. The one who speaks less always controls more. Here's what will blow your mind. Silence not only manipulates others, it strengthens you. It teaches discipline. It teaches patience. It teaches control. By holding your tongue, you build the fortress mind Machiavelli spoke of, the mind that cannot be penetrated, manipulated, or broken. Your implementation is this. In your next confrontation, negotiation, or even casual conversation, deliberately use silence. Withhold your answer. Let the other person reveal their hand, and when they do, you strike, not with noise, but with precision. That is the dark power of strategic silence. Declare in the comments, "I command through silence." Silence is not only a shield, it is a weapon that transforms perception. Weak men think silence makes them look passive, timid, or unsure. But in reality, silence bends perception in your favor. What others interpret as uncertainty, you turn into an aura of mystery. What they assume is hesitation, you convert into fear. The weak man fears silence because it exposes his emptiness. The powerful man uses silence because it multiplies his presence. Here's the truth. Human beings fear the unknown more than anything else. They fear darkness because they don't know what hides in it. They fear silence because they don't know what you are thinking. That vacuum of information is unbearable. And so, when you master silence, you become the unknown factor in every room. Your silence doesn't say, "I don't know." It screams, "I know something you don't." Think of the most intimidating figures in history. The kings, the strategists, the rulers. Rarely were they the ones shouting, begging, or over-explaining themselves. No, those were the voices of the desperate. The powerful sat in silence, letting others stumble over their own words, giving away their own power. Silence forced others to build the story, to fill the gaps, to project their own insecurities. In that projection, fear was born. Psychologically, silence amplifies presence. When you don't rush to respond, people assume depth. When you pause, they wait for your words with anticipation. That anticipation turns into tension. That tension turns into respect. And when respect meets uncertainty, fear is created. Silence, therefore, doesn't weaken you. It makes others uneasy, and uneasiness is the root of fear. Let me give you an image. In a battlefield, a commander who panics and shouts loses the trust of his soldiers. But the commander who stands still, scanning the horizon in silence, radiates control. Even if he has doubts, that silence projects certainty. His men interpret it as confidence, as mastery, and they follow him into fire. This is how silence converts fragility into strength, doubt into authority, weakness into fear. Here's the secret. Silence works because most people are addicted to noise. They need constant validation, constant reassurance, constant filling of space. Break that cycle, and you stand apart. By not giving them what they crave, you create scarcity. Scarcity always increases value. Your silence becomes rare, and rare always equals power. This is the formula. The less you speak, the more your words matter. The more you stay silent, the more people fear what you might say. And when fear enters the equation, dominance follows. Your mission is this. In your next interaction, resist the urge to over-explain. Withhold. Hold your gaze. Let your silence speak louder than words. Watch how people begin to fold under their own discomfort. That is how you turn weakness into fear. Prove you understand this principle. Comment below, my silence is power. You live in a world addicted to noise. Notifications, endless talking, social media rants. Everyone is screaming, yet no one is listening. And here lies the paradox. The louder the world gets, the more valuable silence becomes. The man who controls silence in this modern chaos is the man who controls attention, and attention is the currency of power. Here's what will shock you. In the digital age, silence is not just absence, it's strategy. Every time you remain silent instead of reacting, you're creating scarcity. Scarcity breeds curiosity. Curiosity creates obsession. When others obsess over what you might say, you already hold psychological dominance. Think about it. Weak men rush to comment on everything. They argue in comment sections. They defend themselves in group chats. They try to justify their worth by filling the void with words. Strong men, they don't explain. They don't debate endlessly. They let silence work for them. And in that silence, the world begins to project authority onto them. Psychology proves this. The expectancy effect. When someone expects your words but doesn't get them, their brain enters tension mode. This tension keeps them locked on you, waiting, analyzing, second-guessing. You don't even have to lift a finger. You've already occupied their mental space. That is modern warfare without weapons. Machiavelli once said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does at last." This means control is not about endless reaction, it's about timing. Silence is control over timing. You decide when to strike with words, and because of your restraint, when you finally speak, every syllable carries weight. Look at modern leaders, CEOs, influencers. The ones who post daily noise eventually drown in irrelevance. The ones who vanish strategically, then reappear with precision, capture full attention. This is not accident. It's engineered scarcity. It's silence weaponized for influence. Here's a real-life application. In negotiation, the first person who speaks loses leverage. Why? Because silence forces the other to reveal their hand, to over-explain, to make concessions. By mastering silence, you don't just hold your ground, You force others to collapse under the pressure of filling the void. This is where most men fail. They confuse silence with weakness. They think not responding instantly makes them look small. But here's the brutal truth. Silence doesn't make you small. It makes others restless, and restless minds are easy to control. So here is your command. In the next conversation, practice silence. Count to 5 before you answer. Refuse to explain yourself unless necessary. Make your words cost something. If people want your reaction, let them earn it. That's how modern power games are won, not through noise, but through disciplined silence. If you're ready to master this weapon, comment, "Silence makes me dangerous." Authority is not given, it's taken. And here's the brutal truth. Authority is not built on how much you speak, but on how much weight your silence carries. When silence follows your presence, people interpret it as power. They wonder what you know that they don't. They sense that you see more than you reveal. That mystery alone creates dominance. Most men think leadership is about constant communication, endless explanation, always proving themselves. That's weakness disguised as leadership. True authority doesn't chase validation, it commands it. And silence is the invisible throne you sit on. Here's what will blow your mind. The brain is wired to fear uncertainty. When you remain silent, you create uncertainty. That uncertainty elevates your position automatically. People project strength onto you simply because they cannot measure you. The less they know, the more they assume. And assumptions, when crafted strategically, become the foundation of your unstoppable authority. Machiavelli once said, "A prince never lacks legitimate reasons to break his promise." This means appearances matter more than explanations. Silence allows you to control appearances without exposing the full truth. It gives you plausible deniability while keeping others bound by their own assumptions. You never lose face because you never reveal all. Think about the courtroom. The man who pleads desperately looks guilty. The man who sits in silence, composed, unreadable, he exerts authority over the entire room. Or consider business negotiations. The executive who floods the room with words loses leverage. The one who sits back, speaking rarely but decisively, is the one everyone fears to cross. Here's where weak men fail. They believe respect is earned through constant talking. They brag, they defend, they overshare. Strong men understand that restraint is a weapon. By saying less, they force others to fight for their approval, to chase their acknowledgement, to fill in the silence with their own insecurity. The sinister part. Silence makes others confess. People cannot stand the pressure of an unbroken pause. They reveal secrets, overcommit, expose weaknesses, all because you chose not to speak. That's authority, not chasing, not proving, not explaining. Just letting silence destroy their defenses. Here's how you implement it. In your next confrontation, resist the urge to justify yourself. Instead, pause. Let silence fill the air. Watch how quickly others scramble to fill it. Their anxiety will work for you. Their need to resolve the silence hands you control without you lifting a finger. If you master this, silence will not just be a tactic. It will become your aura. The silent man is the dangerous man. The silent man is the man no one wants to cross. The silent man is the man of unstoppable authority. Declare in the comments, "My silence commands power." You've been lied to since childhood. They told you that being liked is the highest social currency. They drilled into your head that approval equals safety, that validation equals success. But here's the brutal truth. Approval is the drug of the weak. The need to be liked is a chain around your neck, keeping you enslaved to the opinions of others. And here's what will blow your mind. The more desperate you are for approval, the less respect you will ever receive. Think about it. Every time you bend your will to fit in, every time you silence your own convictions just to avoid conflict, you broadcast weakness. The Matrix has programmed you to believe harmony equals power. But harmony without self-respect is slavery. Men who are addicted to approval can never command authority. They spend their entire lives begging for crumbs of validation, while ruthless men feast on respect. Here's the psychological trap. The brain interprets rejection as danger. Evolution wired us to seek acceptance from the tribe for survival. But in the modern world, this wiring is outdated and dangerous. Predators exploit it. They sense your desperation to be liked, and they use it to control you. This is where most men fail. They confuse approval with influence, not realizing they are sacrificing dominance for acceptance. Machiavelli once said, "The one who adapts his policies to please everyone will end up pleasing no one." This means that chasing universal approval is the fastest road to irrelevance and weakness. Respect is earned through strength, not compliance. Picture this: you're in a meeting at work. Your boss proposes an idea that you know is flawed. The weak man nods along, smiling, desperate to avoid conflict. Later, that same man is overlooked for promotion, seen as a spineless follower. The strong man, he calmly points out the flaw, offers a sharper alternative, and earns silent respect. Who do you think rises faster? Not the approval seeker, but the one willing to risk discomfort for dominance. Implementation is simple but ruthless. Practice saying no without apology. Refuse to bend your opinions for approval. Train your mind to embrace discomfort, because discomfort is the crucible of authority. Men who detach from approval addiction become untouchable. Weak men live thirsty for approval. Strong men live for respect. That's the brutal divide. Leave this statement in the comments. I choose respect over approval. Here's what's going to shock you. The less you give of yourself, the more people will chase you. Scarcity is not just an economic principle. It is a weapon of dark psychology. The brutal truth is this: abundance breeds indifference, while scarcity breeds obsession. Men who are always available, always giving, always accessible, are treated as disposable. Men who control their presence like a scarce resource become magnetic. Most men fail here. They believe that generosity of time, attention, and energy will make others value them more. But the opposite is true. When you are too available, you send a silent signal. I have no value to protect. And predators, manipulators, even so-called friends will exploit that weakness. Weak men flood the world with their presence. Strong men withdraw strategically, forcing others to fight for their attention. Psychologically, scarcity activates desire in the human brain. When something is limited, the mind automatically assigns it more value. This is why exclusive clubs, luxury brands, and limited releases command such power. They use the weapon of scarcity to create hunger. Apply this principle to yourself, and you become a fortress of influence. Machiavelli once said, "Men desire novelty so much that those who make themselves rare are admired." This means that your power grows the moment you stop being common. By becoming scarce, you force others to compete for your presence. Respect is no longer requested, it is demanded. Here's an example. The weak man answers every text instantly, rearranges his schedule for others, and bends his time to every demand. He is invisible because he is everywhere. The strong man delays his response, chooses carefully when to engage, and makes his presence an event. People lean forward when he speaks because his silence has weight. That's scarcity at work. Here's how you implement it. Start by withdrawing at least 20% of your availability. Do not respond instantly. Do not say yes to everything. Treat your attention like gold, because it is. The less you give, the more valuable it becomes. The man who masters scarcity doesn't chase respect. He attracts it effortlessly. Weak men scatter their value by being everywhere. Strong men concentrate their value by being rare. Scarcity isn't just power, it's magnetic dominance. Declare this in the comments. My presence is rare, my influence unstoppable. Here's what will blow your mind. The most dangerous men in history rarely shouted. They didn't need to. Their silence was a weapon sharper than any blade. The brutal truth is this: words reveal, but silence conceals. And in concealment lies power. Most men cannot handle silence. They rush to fill the void, to prove themselves, to gain validation. And every time they do, they bleed influence. Weak men equate dominance with volume. They believe raising their voice, over-explaining, or constantly proving themselves makes them powerful. In reality, this exposes them. It reveals insecurity, desperation, and the hunger for approval. Strong men, they let silence do the work. They know that the man who can sit in silence, unshaken, is the man who commands the entire room. Psychologically, silence creates tension. The human brain hates uncertainty, and silence amplifies it. People will project their own fears, desires, and weaknesses into the empty space you leave. In arguments, silence makes the other side reveal too much. In negotiations, it forces the opponent to fill the void with concessions. In relationships, it builds intrigue and desire. Silence is not absence, it is invisible presence. Machiavelli once said, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." This means true power does not scream. It does not justify. It surrounds itself with loyalty and respect, often without a word. Silence becomes the aura that draws men near and keeps enemies guessing. Consider this. A weak man gets insulted and immediately shouts back, desperate to defend his fragile ego. A strong man hears the insult, looks directly into the eyes of his enemy, and says nothing. That silence crushes harder than any words could. The attacker begins to doubt himself, feel exposed, even retreat. That is silent dominance in action. Implementation is simple but brutal. Resist the urge to always respond. Train yourself to embrace pauses, to let others reveal themselves, to weaponize silence in moments of tension. The man who doesn't flinch in silence is the man everyone fears. Weak men chatter endlessly, drowning themselves in words. Strong men master silence, turning it into a throne of dominance. The less you speak, the more your presence commands. Silence isn't weakness, it is the ultimate power. Declare this now in the comments. My silence dominates louder than any words. You began this journey like every other man, programmed, conditioned, chained by illusions. You were told to always explain yourself, to always seek approval, to always respond, to always be fair. You were raised inside a psychological cage, believing that noise equals strength, that being liked equals safety, and that silence equals weakness. But now you know better. You've seen the ruthless truths that most men will never even dare to confront. We've uncovered the terrifying power of strategic silence, a weapon that rewrites power dynamics, forces others into submission, and transforms your presence into authority. You've learned that silence creates mystery, tension, and control, and that weak men run from it, while strong men command it. You've seen how Machiavelli's forbidden principles still govern modern life, just as they did centuries ago. But here's the brutal truth. Knowing this is not enough. Knowledge without action is useless. The man who listens but doesn't implement is still enslaved. Silence without control is just emptiness. You cannot afford to walk away unchanged, because while you hesitate, ruthless men are already using these principles against you. They are already commanding respect in boardrooms, in relationships, in life, while you sit there debating whether to act. Every day you delay, you lose ground. Every time you speak when you should remain silent, you hand over your power. Every time you rush to prove yourself, you shrink in the eyes of others. Every second you fail to apply these laws, you stay trapped in the role of the weak man, the man who talks too much, reveals too much, and achieves nothing. But here's where it flips. The fact that you made it this far proves you are not like the majority. Most men clicked away because they couldn't handle these truths. They wanted comfort, not confrontation. They wanted lies, not brutal honesty. You stayed. That means you are already different. You are already building the fortress mind that cannot be shaken. So here's your final command. Start living as if silence is your deadliest weapon. When someone disrespects you, pause. When someone pressures you, pause. When you want to prove yourself, pause. In those moments, silence will crush egos, shift dynamics, and crown you the dominant force. You won't just be heard, you'll be felt. Now listen carefully. This transformation is only beginning. If you want to hardwire these principles into your psychology and keep sharpening your dominance, then you need to stay in this brotherhood of ruthless men. Prove you're ready now. Like this video. Show that you are done being naive. Share this message. Wake up another man who's trapped in weakness. Subscribe right now, because this is only the first step in your transformation. Comment your final declaration of power. My silence makes me untouchable. This is your initiation into a new reality. From this moment on, you are no longer the man who explains, who apologizes, who begs. You are the man who commands respect without speaking. You are the man who bends others with the weight of his silence. You are the man Machiavelli himself would recognize as dangerous. Remember this: words may influence, but silence dominates. You are no longer ordinary. You are no longer vulnerable. You are no longer weak. From today forward, you are unstoppable.